This podcast is part of the Batman Universe Podcast Network, hosted by the BatmanUniverse.net. Check out everything related to Batman and the entire Bat family at the BatmanUniverse.net, including news and original content related to comics, movies, television, merchandise, video games, and more. Also, check out some of the other unique podcasts that TBU has to offer. Consider supporting this podcast by becoming a patron on Patreon. Even $1 can go a long way in supporting this content that you enjoy. Look for a link over at the BatmanUniverse.net to offer your support now. And now, on with the show.
Hi, my name is Peter Tomasi.
Hi, this is James Tynan IV.
Hi, I'm Dan Jurgens.
Hey, I'm Dustin Wynn.
This is Jim Lee.
Hey, this is Scott Snyder.
This is Mark Hamill speaking.
This is Kevin Conroy.
This is Tim Sale.
Hello, everyone. I'm Batman, and you're listening to my podcast.
Hello, and welcome to the Batman Universe Comics Podcast, Season 12, Episode 27, the season finale of 2020. We've made it to the end of our 12th season, and I am very excited to bring you this last Batman Universe podcast of the year. I'm your host, Ian, and with me I have...
This is Steph.
And this is Theo.
And we had a lot of news, as I thought we would. We got solicitations for March 2021 with the news of DC's new publishing initiative, which is not a reboot. We have a lot of returning comics, even though they may have new teams on them. And it's clearly a continuation of the continuity that has been set up by James Tynan as sort of the showrunner for the Batman universe. But they're having a new branding called Infinite Frontier. I think this is clearly a connection to the DC Universe Infinite platform name. I'm very excited about having branding, although I have to admit DC Universe Infinite does not roll off my tongue. I prefer... DC Universe Infinite Frontier does not roll off my tongue. I prefer DC Infinite, which is what I will generally be calling it. We have 8 books that are scheduled to come out in March, and probably more will come in April. But these are our launch titles for DC Infinite. I am very excited that none of them are double shipping. I think that double shipping has really been murder on the artists. Even though I've liked a lot of the artists we've gotten on these books, it is frustrating to have arcs that are just full of different artists. We have, of course, Batman, which is returning with Jorge Jimenez and James Tynan IV. We also have a second title, which is The Joker. And James Tynan says that this is actually a story of Jim Gordon pursuing the Joker, and Jim Gordon's very much going to be one of the main characters. So I am extremely excited about that. Another thing is that all books that used to be double shipping are now going to have backups. So they will be $5 with an 8 or 10 page backup story behind them. I have to admit, I am not super happy about $5 comics, but I would much rather have an 8 to 10 page backup rather than a cardstock cover, which is what the $5 books have been up to this point, because at least now I have an extra story.
As long as it's a good story.
I mean, I would, of course, prefer it to be a good story, but in terms of value for money, that's my logic. I've been going through page counts and price per page for quite a while now, and even though, obviously, an 80-page bad story is not worth more than a 20-page good story, I still like to have more product for what I'm spending.
Yeah, I would prefer more pages of content myself. Considering what we were just discussing before recording, paying $5 for a cardstock cover, which I thought was just pretty much a waste.
Even if you like the cardstock cover, I don't think it's worth the extra $1. We have 3 backups in Batman, The Joker, and Detective Comics, which is going to be written by Mariko Tamaki, who just came off of Wonder Woman. I do recommend that Wonder Woman run, by the way, if anyone's interested. The backup for Batman and Detective will be a 2-part story, so if you want to read the whole thing, you have to buy both of them, which is their clever plan. It's written by Josh Williamson, and it's called Robin, and it's about Damian facing his legacy between Batman and Talia, of course. So that should be kind of exciting. He has a new gray costume instead of the red costume, but they are still branding him as Robin. So I think that'll be interesting to check out. The Joker has a backup of Punchline by the same team that did the Punchline one-shot, which is Tynan, Sam Johns, and Mirka Andolfo. And my comment on the Punchline one-shot was that I thought it should have been backups for the Batman books. So I'm actually really amused that that's exactly what they're doing with it. I think it's very exciting that it's going to feature Leslie Tompkins, who's one of my favorite characters, and of course Harper Row, but I'm mostly excited for Leslie Tompkins. So it's funny that I'm probably going to be buying the Joker book for Jim Gordon and Leslie Tompkins, even though I'm supposed to be buying it for Punchline and Joker.
Well, put me in the numbers who won't be buying it at all.
All right. We also have Urban Legends, which is an anthology book with 3 stories per issue. It's going to be $8 for 64 pages, although I'm imagining it'll probably be closer to about 52 pages of story content at most. And unlike a lot of these anthology titles, they're going to have serialized stories. So there's going to be a 6-issue story about Red Hood by Chip Zdarsky for the first 6 issues. I think that's a really good idea. This really reminds me of the Batman Chronicles series that used to come out in the 90s. And that was quarterly, actually. So it wasn't a monthly title. And that had 3 stories, and they tended to be longer stories. They weren't usually serialized, but they had the same writing teams for most of the issues, which sort of gave a sense of the connected universe of Batman. And I think this could be a really good idea. I hope that they use it to focus on, characters who often don't get as much focus as Batman himself. Now, of course, Batman's the selling point, so I don't want Batman to be absent, but I think that this should be used to promote and increase the fan bases of other characters. Oh, I should also mention that Detective Comics is going to have Huntress in it, which makes me very excited because I've been missing Huntress for a while now.
At least she was on the cover, or is there actually information about her in the solicit?
It's not in the solicits, but the artist has been drawing her and promoting her, so I don't think they'd just, have that on the cover for nothing, since the artist who drew the cover is also drawing the interiors.
Because the covers are liars.
The covers are full of lies. You are not wrong at all about that.
Outside of, the 2 main Batman books, Urban Legends is the one that I'm most excited for.
It's definitely the most experimental one.
What else is in there? You said there's 3 stories, so it's Red Hood and what else?
Rifter, Outsiders, and Red Hood. So that's exactly what I'm hoping for. Focus on characters that don't get as much normally. We also have 4 quote-unquote regular books at $4 a pop. That's Harley Quinn with a new team of Stephanie Phillips and Riley Rossmo, Teen Titans Academy, Catwoman with a continuing team of Ram V and Fernando Blanco, and Nightwing with the new team, but old numbering, so it's 78. It's not going to be a number 1. A new team of Tom Taylor and Bruno Redondo, who just came off of their run of Suicide Squad. So this is kind of cool. James Tynion has been promoting the interconnectedness of the Batman titles, and I think that's a really good thing. It's one thing we all were hoping for, as we'll get into in a little bit.
Well, I think I know you mentioned you like the idea of no longer having double shipping. I think the additional books will make up for that for me. I personally didn't have an issue with double shipping because, especially when Batman and Tech were on opposite schedules, because they always kept a book in your hand, and now that they're going to single issues per month, at least they have some other things to supplement that. So, pocketbook and wallets will still be, somewhat lighter, but I think, I think that the additional content by way of these new titles will be great.
I agree. I think it's going to be exciting. So I wanted to get into our year in review. Back in our season opener, or it wasn't really I guess it could be called a pilot of season 12 in January, we talked about what we hoped and predicted would happen this year in 2020. Now, fortunately, none of us were as crazy to predict a pandemic, but that definitely happened.
And comics being canceled for who knows how
It was about a month
was.
for DC. It was longer for Marvel. Maybe 2 months, actually.
It felt longer. It did.
It definitely felt longer.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
it's 2 months because I remember we did retrospective podcasts on Little Gotham, Batman,
Oh, yeah.
White Knight,
Yeah, we did.
and
Yeah, and
Harley.
there was the
And I think there was one more that we did.
there was the whole Diamond fiasco as well.
Thank goodness we're not stuck with Diamond alone anymore. All right, but we have our predictions, so I'm going to let each of my co-hosts read theirs. It's pretty short, and then we'll talk about how they've gone.
Well, my prediction was just a hope and a prayer that whatever they did for the Batman reboot at number 100 when Luke Fox became Batman wouldn't suck. And absolutely none of that happened.
That's true, but we are getting Future State with Tim Fox as Batman.
Tim Fox
for
Batman,
2 months.
Speaking of which, did y'all see that new variant?
Yeah, with without the mask, right?
Without the mask, yeah, that thing looks awesome.
It's a very pretty cover.
Yeah, Ken Lashley did it.
Yeah. I still am frustrated that they're doing this thing where like dropping you in the middle of the story instead of giving us Tim Fox's origin, but I
because people like me, I literally don't know who Tim Fox is.
I think 90% of the audience doesn't know who Tim Fox is.
But yeah, 100 was, I mean, did we get to 100? What issue were we on? Oh yeah, like 103. So yeah, nothing sucked. I mean, some of it could have been better. And there was no reboot. But overall, I've been very happy with Tynion's run.
I agree.
And so it's all fine.
All right, Theo, what was your hope or prediction?
Well, my more of a prediction, and it was a hope too, was that by the time we got to the end of the year, that there would be much more cohesion between the Bat books. Because you go from one to the other, and things were just so disjointed. So we do see that as of Joker War, things seem to have come into place between the books somewhat, and I'm happy for that because again, it helps move the story along better, between the titles, and just that cohesion is a great thing to have.
And it also gets excitement for the whole lineup, so you're more interested in reading the other books.
Except for everything that Snyder's doing that is not in the books at all.
Yeah, but that's basically an alternate future, so it doesn't matter.
Or everything Castellucci did in Batgirl.
Oh my gosh, I'm trying to forget that. I think that your prediction has come true, but only because there was so little cohesion that any cohesion is better. But I think that Tynion's really done a good job of working with the other writers to try and get everyone more on the same page.
Yeah, I do appreciate that they're treating JT somewhat like the Hickman with the X books. He has a bunch of writers around him, but he's still kind of guiding the way with the main book in the X-Men universe, and you can kind of see the same thing going on here with JT in the Batman universe.
And something I think is important to note is that unlike the last three writers who have been the sort of superstar Batman writers, Tom King, Scott Snyder, and Grant Morrison, James Tynion is very much a collaborator. I mean, he started his solo career as a writer doing backups for Snyder, and he also was the showrunner for Batman Eternal and Batman and Robin Eternal, which were intensely collaborative. So I think that it's really good that he's now running the show, because I think he's the kind of writer who will throw in references to what's going on in the other titles, unlike the other writers. My prediction, and it was very much more of a hope than a prediction, was a Steph book, Stephanie Brown. We are closer to a Stephanie Brown book than we have been in definitely 2 years. You could possibly argue in a decade. I think that we're much more likely to have a Batgirls book with Barbara, Cassandra, and Stephanie together, and I would be happy with that. But we don't.
That is one of the things we talked about. When we talked about what our predictions would be and what a Steph book would look like, that was one of the things that you said that would be also awesome.
Well, I continue in my belief that would be awesome, and I hope to be proved right in April. So that's our predictions for 2020. Let us know if any of your predictions came true or were stymied, or if new exciting things happened. I also want people to give us their answer to our question of the week, which is, what were some of your favorite Batman universe memories this year? You don't have to pick one, just pick 2 to 4 that your favorite and share them with us. And we'll do so now. So go ahead, Steph, tell us some of your favorite Batman universe memories this year.
I loved that Super Sons came back, and it seems to be pretty decent. I read the first 2 digital first issues, and 1 to 2 is throwing me for a loop. But I'm not going to look a gift horse in the mouth. I'm just going to love it and be happy with it. I love that Batcat came out. That was great. Even though that's closer to the end of the year, that was still a great book or great first issue. And I guess I've just really appreciated, even though he's done now, I do appreciate that that Tomasi ended on a high note, and I was very happy. So most of my happy things are for the end of the year. But I liked that Tomasi seemed to end on a bittersweet high note, and I really like that. And Tomasi has not made the book suck, so that's good too. Those are all four things I was happy about this year.
So, not to sound too dark when I say this, but one of my favorite moments of the Batman universe was the death of Uberick and the return of Dick Grayson. I think that was something that was a long time coming for all of us who was just tired of what was going on with our favorite former Robin. Let's see. My next one would be Joker Warzone, particularly the story where Cass and Steph for creating themselves as the next generation of Batgirls. I truly enjoyed that. And for me, another one is actually enjoying reading a good Catwoman story now. I really enjoy what Ram V is doing with the title. And again, it has some cohesion with the overall Batman universe. And let's see, do I have a 4th one? I'm trying to be a little bit different than Steph, but I can't because I miss my Super Sons too, and I'm happy that they're back. And I'm also sad to see Tomasi go, especially after that great issue of Tech 1031.
Some of my favorites this year are going to not surprise anyone at all. I really loved the Robin 80th anniversary special. I thought almost all of those stories were really good, especially the Grayson story by Tom King and Tim Seeley with Mikkel Jenner and Jerome Cox returning from that series. But of course, the shining star in that anthology was the Steph story drawn by Damian Scott and colors by Brad Anderson. I just can't tell you what it meant to have Steph back and acknowledged as an official Robin. She got her own official variant cover and her own story. I also really adored when Steph called Barbara a couple weeks ago in Batman 104 and said, "Batgirl's calling Batgirl Prime." I think that is the roadmap for the future, and I think that DC really should embrace that, and I think fans could get behind that, and it'd be a real success. I also want to highlight Batman number 98, where Bruce hallucinates Alfred telling him how to get out of his current situation being gassed by the Joker in Joker War, and actually it was Punchline who gassed him. And he comes out of it after embracing his memory of Alfred, and his cape spells out, "I'm Batman." And I thought that was both hilarious and awesome. So those are some of our favorites. We reserve the right to add more to them if we think of them. But go ahead and share some of your favorite 2020 Batman Universe moments.
And for the record, it was Detective Comics 1033, not 1031.
Ah, yes. I was wondering if you meant this issue or the next one. Okay, so let's get to our review section. We're going to start with a review of Batman 105.
I am vengeance. I am the night. I am Batman.
Written by James Tynion IV, illustrated by Carlo Pagulayan, Alvaro Martinez, and Christian Duch. Summary. In the past, as Bruce heads back to Gotham on a plane, Ghostmaker confronts him one last time, trying to get Bruce to join him on his quest to stop crime permanently around the world, which Bruce again rejects in favor of a more compassionate approach in Gotham. Today, in Arkham, Batman tells Clown Hunter he has to stop, or Ghostmaker will kill Bao for killing Harley. Batman frees himself and Harley, but instead of running, Harley apologizes to Bao for her part in killing his family, and explains her desire to find redemption for all she did when she followed the Joker. Bao leaves, unable to kill Harley, and Ghostmaker arrives, furious that Batman found a way to avoid more bloodshed. However, Batman doesn't want to beat Ghostmaker. Just as he did before Year One, and in Batman Incorporated, he asks Ghostmaker to join him, and his former friend agrees, even to Batman's no-kill rule. They race to stop another crime together. So, what do you think of this resolution to the first post-Joker War arc?
Well, as an avid fan of the anime genre, which isn't a genre, it's a medium. But anyway, people get redeemed all the time, and they're usually just the worst villains, and then, you get their backstory, and you feel bad, and then they have a change of heart, blah, blah, blah. This was too fast. No. I'm fine with him changing sides. I'm fine with him having a change of heart. It was too fast. One conversation a good guy does not make. So, and there was no persuasion. It was just, hey, follow me. It's no. So I was okay with it, but it was too fast. It should have been another issue of somehow converting him to Batman's side.
To go down a little bit more, to go to a little lower level than Steph's explanation on her thoughts, I hated it. It was, that ending was just, for lack of better words, lame. I can always go into the same foray that Steph did, but I mean, you just go from bam, 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 I'm gonna beat you, I'm gonna beat you, I'm gonna beat you. Okay, I'll join your side.
Mm-hmm.
That was terrible. I hated it, and those last few pages ruined the issue for me, if not the entire arc. Would it have been saved had it gone on for a few more issues? I don't know, but it's obvious we're not going to see that, because of how things are. And yeah, I did not like it at all.
I can completely understand why my co-hosts have this reaction, because it was very quick. But I think that as I look back over the arc, I see the seeds layered, especially in the last issue. So we have the first seed layered when we see Dick saying that Batman offered to Ghostmaker to join during Batman Incorporated, which at this point is probably several years ago. And there was also a really great moment last issue where Bruce says to Dick, as Robin in flashback, that Ghostmaker was a friend. And that wasn't something I was expecting, because his first two issues, he was such a jerk to Bruce the whole time. I think that Tynion put a bit more effort into the transformation than just this one issue. But I would agree that it's definitely a difficult change in alliance to completely swallow. Other people have also criticized Tynion for writing Batman accepting or caring about Clown Hunter, even though he's killed dozens of people. When, he's been really hard on Jason Todd, and he actually hasn't been that hard on Damian for his kills. So I think there's actually precedent for Batman not being merciless to this kid who has been completely traumatized and snapped into following a path of lethal revenge. But I think Tynan's Batman he's trying to make a Batman who's not as harshly black and white. He's firmly committed to the no-kill rule himself, and he wants to persuade people, but he doesn't crush people who disagree with him. He's trying to be less of the my way or the highway. He's still Batman. He still thinks his way is best, but he's not as domineering and definitely not as much of a bat jerk as we might have seen in the early 2000s, which our intrepid Stella in Batgirl's Oracle is fond of pointing out bat jerks' tendencies. I think Tynan is explicitly trying to make Batman not a bat jerk.
But of course, this isn't going to last, right?
Oh, of course not. I mean, Ghost Hunter is clearly going to be an antagonist, but I think this is a fun twist. And if this were the end of Ghostmaker, obviously I'd completely agree with you, because this is totally, for all the stuff they've spent in trying to make Ghost Hunter this big threat, you can't just wrap him up in 4 issues. But I don't think Tynan intends to. This is the beginning of the Ghost Hunter Batman relationship that's going to play out through the next year, and I think that will be pretty exciting myself. And I don't know, I just over on the website, Scott mentioned that this was just the message that he liked to see, is people coming together and being willing to apologize for making wrong choices in the past and committing to make better choices in the future. And I think maybe I was just in a place where I wanted to hear that, and it was very heartwarming to me. So I definitely liked that resolution, and I can see where I think the groundwork was laid, even though I agree it is very quick. Where are we in the path that we see for these characters? We've got Ghostmaker, Punchline, Harley, Batman, and the Bat Family. Ghostmaker is now an antagonist, but also an ally. Punchline, of course, has her plot that's going to be running in the Joker, where she tries to make a following through her podcast. Harley thinks she's an ally of Batman, and Batman actually believes her, but he also thinks she's very annoying. Batman himself is trying to be a better Batman on a budget, and the Bat Family is being independent and making bold choices. What do you think about all these trajectories going into 2021?
Well, I mean, there's been a lot of parallels between Batman and tech lately. Not like literal story, but elements within the story. And so one of the things has been that the Bat Family is kind of just window dressing their plot. So I'm a little sad at that, and I really don't hope that continues, because it seems like Batman's making a new Bat Family between Bao and Harley and Ghostmaker. Sure, new things are fine. New things are great, but when you have the old things and you're just literally treating them like window dressing, it's just a little sad. It's like, at least give them something to do. I don't know. But, so it's fine, but also makes me a little sad.
Yeah, Steph's biggest concern is my biggest concern as well. And those who have read my reviews, would know that I have not appreciated how the Bat Family has been depicted, especially since the end of the Joker War. They've just been more or less plot devices, and I'm concerned, especially in the main title, considering JT has said that, we'll be seeing a lot of Babs in his stories, that he's going to be a second fiddle, especially while this whole Ghostmaker thing is going to be going on. So I'm not too excited about that. I am hopeful, though, that as Nightwing and Red Hood continues with their individual stories, and I'll just say for the record, I've really been enjoying Red Hood since he's made the move to the Hill. So I'm hoping that they can regain themselves in their own books, which again would mean we need a Batgirls book. but yeah, that's my biggest concern with the trajectory right now is that, you know, the original family is not being depicted as they should.
One more question, which is, what do you think of the art? We have Carla Pagulayan doing the quick Ghost Maker flashback, and then Alvaro Martinez, inked by Christian Duce, doing the main art. And Alvaro Martinez is perhaps best known for doing a lot of the art during James Tynan's run of Detective Comics, so I'm a big fan of his. So I liked seeing his Batman. And James Tynan and Alvaro Martinez were joking about how they really love drawing Batman shirtless, like in the classic Ra's al Ghul sword fight. What do you think of the art this issue?
It's really great. There wasn't too much of a drastic difference between the flashback and the main, so it wasn't, I didn't notice the difference. Harley looked adorable and cute and contrite. Like, the emotion on the faces was really, really well done. And there was a lot of action, a lot of fun. It was good. It was wonderful. Great.
Yeah, I mean, we've all commented how great the art has been this entire arc, and it continues with this issue. So, yeah, no complaints at all with that. I mean, it's not our good friend Jorge Jimenez, but this arc was a good substitute while he was away.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward even more to Jorge's return. Not because we've had bad art, but because, the more good art you have, the better it is. So, out of... katanas. How many out of 5 katanas would you give Batman number 105?
As hokey as the last... And I think the end is really kind of ruined by just how hokey the dialogue is at the end there. I'd still give it a good healthy 3.5. I enjoyed it. I liked the redemption. I wish it had been a redemption arc, but whatever.
I am going to give it a 3 out of 5 katanas. That ending it really kind of ruined it for me. The art was great. I think the art really redeemed it, but that ending was just really bad for me.
I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5. I'm a big fan of Alvaro Martinez and Carla Pagulayan, and I'm also a huge fan of Tynan. And I see this as more of a setup arc rather than necessarily its own arc. And as part of that, I think the issue functions very well. And I like what it does. Over on the website, Scott gave it a 5 out of 5, which is a rare feat for most of us. So that gives the overall arc, I think, a 4 out of 5 katanas for Batman 105.
You want to get nuts? Come on, let's get nuts.
So after our answers to the questions of the week, we had the opportunity to record with our fearless leader, Dustin. So we have a conversation about what's happened this year, what we think is going to happen, and what his favorite memories of the Batman universe were this year in 2020. How do you think this year has gone versus your expectations? Obviously, none of us predicted the pandemic, but how do you think it's gone for Batman comics this year?
I think overall it's been. I've enjoyed a lot of the books that they've been releasing this year. I think the biggest issue would have been dealing with the pandemic and the release schedule and things like that in the middle of the year, and I think that put a lot of hiccups into a lot of plans. Not to say that the outcome of the year would have been much different, but I think that there was certain pauses with a lot of stories that I think hurt some of the stories. But I think overall, I think the books were very enjoyable. I think the standout to me was by far Batman with James Tynan. It's no secret that I like Tynan's work. I like that he incorporates the other members of the Bat family more than most of the other major writers on some of the books recently with Tom King and Scott Snyder over the past 10 years. I enjoy that aspect. I've always enjoyed that aspect of incorporating the different members. And he's even taking it a step further by introducing more characters into the Bat family. And while I had some issues with Bluebird and Signal and some of the other characters that came up, I don't feel the same. I don't know if it's just because I don't feel the disdain of against the stories compared to like Scott Snyder's story and Tom King's stories and things like that of introducing characters. And Tom King wasn't really introducing that many characters, but like just doing things differently. I think for whatever reason, there's something about Tynan's writing that makes me just enjoy the books a little bit more. And obviously, Batman is just one facet of the entire universe. There's other books. I think another highlight was Nightwing finally being Nightwing again instead of being the lost boy of Bloodhaven. So, but I think it's also nice to see that Batgirl ended, because I'm hoping that means there's something new on the horizon. But I think that 2021 has good promise because of what we've seen come out of the Bat books in 2020.
What do you think of the cohesiveness of the line? Do you feel that James Tynion has lived up to some of his promise to bring the line together after the lack of cohesion during Tom King and Scott Snyder's runs?
So that's, I think, one of those things we have to wait and see. I think there is a little bit more cohesion. I feel like when Joker War was going on, I think that was the most prominent aspect of showing the cohesion amongst the books. A lot of that has to do, outside of Tynion, has to do with editorial. Kind of having one editor maintaining all of the books is always better than having two editors, divvy up the groups of books. But I think that Tynion has bigger plans for the Bat books as a whole, and as kind of the writer in charge per se, because he is heading up Batman. A lot of his ideas are going to carry over some of the other books. And I honestly think that some of the new teams that are coming on to some of the books, I think will work a little bit better with with what Tynion's doing. Tom King in some ways kind of squared himself off from everybody else whenever they had a number of different titles trying to tie into the stuff that King was doing. Perfect example is like the Prelude to the Wedding, that kind of stuff. It just didn't feel like it worked because none of these other books were really dealing with the stuff that Tom King was, because Tom King was kind of doing his own thing and ignoring the stuff that was happening in the other titles. Scott Snyder had multiple storylines that incorporated other characters into them, and the other books obviously would be thrown into whatever crossover they were trying to do, but it just didn't feel like it worked as well. And I think that I think Joker War was kind of the starting point of what we could see come 2021 with more cohesion amongst the titles. I think the recent interview with Tynion talking about the different Bat books and the plans for what's happening in the Batman universe, as well as the interview that was released with Ben Abernathy, one of the editors over at DC. I think that they have some ideas, and I think it's just a matter of execution at this point and seeing how they execute it. And if it is well, I think one of the biggest things with the Bat books in general is that I think readers enjoy when there is that cohesion, and I think DC is realizing that when it comes to the Superman books, or it comes to a Green Lantern book or Aquaman, or some of the other books that focus specifically on a character, there's not a lot of other books that kind of fall within the same gravitational pull as the main title. Wonder Woman has right now 2 issues releasing a month. There's another book that comes out. There's the upcoming sensational Wonder Woman, but that's the extent of it. Superman has 3 or 4 titles that kind of deal with Metropolis and things like that. But I think when it comes to the Bat books, there's just so much content that comes out that it actually hurts the line if the books don't react to other things happening in the books. And I think it'll be nice to see more of that.
Yeah, and I think one of the teams that we have right now that's continuing, that's demonstrated a really good job of working with Tynion, is Ram V on Catwoman.
Yes, exactly.
His Catwoman title, it's very much its own story. Like, it's not the Batman backup, but he's integrated so you can read them together, and they're good stories on their own, and they also enhance each other because you see where they take each other. And I'm really looking forward to more of that. Any other teams you were thinking about that might be like that?
Honestly, I'm kind of looking forward to see, and I can't say how connected it's going to be, but I'm really looking forward to see what happens with Nightwing it's with Tom Taylor coming on board. I think that it's going to be interesting because I think he has a great understanding of how to like incorporate multiple facets. And I know that Nightwing is typically outside of Gotham, or at least it recently has been. But the idea of Batgirl being involved, even if it is just for a story arc, it shows that there is that interconnection between the characters at the very least. You know, the writers recognize that there are characters that already exist. There's not a need to necessarily create new characters, but that doesn't mean you can't create new characters. Because a perfect example, I think, in my mind, is Ghostmaker. The character, I think, was fleshed out enough, but it leaves enough where you still want to maybe learn more about the character as time progresses. And I think that's the perfect introduction of a character, rather than just giving us all kinds of information or not enough information. It as we've seen in some ways with Signal, how Signal was fleshed out in a mini series, but that was like ages after the character premiered. To a degree, Bluebird, he had that gradual, but it was such a slow burn that you just don't get to being interested in the character until, well, now she's here, and now you have to be interested because she is this other character that means something more. And I think that when it comes to what Tynan's doing, but I think Tom Taylor is a great example of somebody who understands utilizing characters. You know, with his background with Deceased and Injustice, I think that he has a lot of potential of doing some really great stuff when it comes to the Nightwing title and incorporating some of these other characters that we don't really get to see the interactions. Because I think a lot of us who are longtime Batman or Bat Universe, you know, listeners and have appreciated the Batman Universe books and things like that, I think longtime readers they look forward to those interactions between the established characters. Yeah, it's nice to see, you know, the characters interact with new characters. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think we like to see those character moments between the established characters. We want to see Tim Drake interacting with Dick. We want to see Dick interacting with Babs. We want to see Jason interacting with Damian. We want to see Bruce interacting with basically everybody because, you know, he's not a loner who needs to be all by himself all the time. And I think there's the writing, a lot of the teams that are coming for the books, I think, get that, and they understand that the characters, the best stuff we can possibly get is the characters interacting with each other.
DC's also been doing a lot of alternate universe or supplemental type takes on Batman recently. We have Batman Black and White. We have Batman Catwoman. We have White Knight presents Harley Quinn. How do you think those experiments are going?
Well, when it comes to some of them, I think, Batman Catwoman, I think will do well. I think it's a little too soon to decide. I mean, to a degree, almost all of these, except for the Batman White Knight presents Harley Quinn, has only been, you know, one or two issues. So the thing is, at this point in time, I think it's tough to say. But looking at some of the other stuff that they've produced over the past year, I mean, one of the things, I think, one of the books that a lot of people seem to forget about is Batman vs. Ra's al Ghul, which was horrible, absolutely horrible. And that book ended up not releasing its last two issues because of the pandemic, and now the final two issues are being solicited. The first of the final two issues is being solicited for March, and that's an example of an alternate version of Batman, or in Neil Adams' mind, a real version of Batman that exists in real continuity, but to no one else. But I think that when it comes to these experiments, I'm open to them because I think it allows these different interpretations of Batman to exist. I can't sit here and say that I was against the idea of the Arkham books when they were doing the Arkham title or the Arkham video games and having the tie-ins. Some of those tie-ins had some really good stories that wouldn't work within the confines of normal continuity. I'm all for the idea of doing stories outside the realm of normal continuity, as long as it's known that it's outside the realm of continuity. Because the problem is when you leave it too open as to whether or not it's part of continuity or not, people start choosing whether or not to accept things. And I don't think that's the route that you should be going. I think, as I've said, obviously, long time, continuity matters and it makes a difference. So by all means, they can do these alternate versions. They can do Injustice or Deceased or Black and White. They can tell the stories that they want to tell without the confines of continuity, because it leaves them the ability to do all kinds of things that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do. It also allows you to have stories like the death of characters that wouldn't otherwise be killed because they're just too important, and you can see the ramifications that those kind of situations lead. And I think those are good to see, but it's not what we need to see all the time.
All right. One quick business question. What do you think about the choice to stop double shipping and instead do $5 books with backups?
That's a good question. So when I was thinking about the idea, so when they announced that they were going to single ship again, I was open to the idea because double shipping is slightly annoying. However, the one plus of double shipping is that you can get through you can release stories in a much quicker pace. And I was kind of on the fence because I was thinking about this before and thinking to myself, well, the one thing I liked about Joker War was that the story did not take place over an extended amount of time. However, the one thing that I keep thinking about when I think about Joker War is how maybe it could have dealt with, how maybe it could have been a little bit longer. Maybe it could have fleshed out a little bit more things within the confines of what was going on in Joker War. There was aspects that could have been expanded upon. And then I keep thinking back to the huge events of the 90s and thinking about how long they lasted and thinking, well, if they were double shipping, they wouldn't have never lasted as long as they did. However, I think when it comes to double shipping, it presents problems. It presents logistical issues. And I think ultimately it's better for the titles and the overall run, the overall line to not have double shipping. The idea of raising the price to $5 instead of $4 an issue and only having one, it saves the readers money because you don't have to, if you're super interested in what's going on in Batman, you're not having to pick up two $4 issues every single month. Instead, you pick up one $5 issue. The idea of backups, I love it. I've always loved the idea of backups. I wish they would have always been more successful because I think that there's a book like Detective Comics doesn't warrant more pages. It just warrants more story. So I think that by having backups and having the ability to have other writers come on and do backups within these larger books, it makes perfect sense. It reminds me of when Detective Comics way back was more focused on the Bat family and less on Batman, and where everybody had different focuses and they do different stories based on the different characters. And there are so many characters within the Batman universe that are never going to necessarily get a ongoing series that's going to be super successful. I think the idea of doing a book, even like the recently announced Batman Urban Legends, I think a book like that where they could have a Red Hood story and tell a Red Hood story for a while or tell a Signal story. I think that works because you can get a writer who says, I've got a really good Signal story, but it's only going to, it wouldn't warrant being a full 6 miniseries or 6-issue miniseries. It warrants being maybe 3 issues. Well, they're not really doing a whole lot of miniseries right now. There are some, but there's not a lot of miniseries unless they're, very high profile creators on them. So the issue is you're never going to see those stories. But I think there's a lot of creators who have smaller stories that work perfectly in an anthology type or in the backup format of a title. So I think the idea of the single issues and getting away from double shipping, I think is a great idea. I think it opens up the possibilities of also having the ability to focus on other characters as well. Back during the New 52, there was always 4 main Bat books. There's Batman and Robin, Detective Comics, Batman, and why does it escape me? There was another one.
Urban Legends.
Anyway. No, there was another book. What was the other book? There was a Batman book like every single week during the New 52. Well, even for
it was Batman.
Yes, it was Batman: The Dark Knight. Yes, that's what it was. And then during even before that, we had like Batman, Detective Comics, Shadow of the Bat, Legends of the Dark Knight. There was Gotham Knights for a while. There's always been a number of different Batman books. And the thing is, when you have a book that has the ability to focus on other characters besides just Batman, I think you open up the possibilities of storytelling. So I think I open the idea of backups because I think that's going to give them the ability. I'm open to the idea of a book like Urban Legends because I love the idea of an anthology book that can tell different stories, based off of characters that would not otherwise get a larger focus because they just don't warrant that.
I think I might be the only person who enjoyed double shipping.
I like double ship, but I understand why people don't.
I enjoyed parts of it. Like, I definitely enjoyed being able to read Tynan's detective comics every other week because I was so invested in that story.
It's true, yeah.
But I also, the effect of the artist was so catastrophic. There was only one arc in that entire run that was drawn by one artist.
I think it presents the art is the biggest problem with double shipping. I'm not going to sit here and say I don't like the idea of double shipping because it does continue that story that, the main focus of the story. The issue is that you have a book like Detective Comics, and no offense to Peter Tomasi, but Detective Comics the way it's being released, it does not warrant having 2 books per month. There's no reason it needs to have 2 books per month. The stories that they're telling is not high profile. There's a lot of, it's whisking around the Batman universe, and it's containing all these different elements that focus on other characters and has the ramifications that need to happen. So why does it need to be double shipping? Well, it's double shipping because Batman's the main character and they wanted Batman to be double shipping. So Detective and Batman are double shipping. I think when it comes to certain stories, like honestly, looking at Tom King's run with double shipping, I don't think it didn't work. I think the only aspect that it didn't work at was the fact that they were rushed and the art suffered because of that, because there was too many situations where they needed to have artists come in and do 3-4 pages, 1-2 pages of an issue to finish it off because they just didn't have enough time. And I think in some cases, when it comes to the writers sometimes get rushed because of the constant schedule they have to be on because they're having to churn out 2 issues per month. So I think there's downfalls when it comes to double shipping, but story progression, I think if the story warrants it, there's no reason you can't do that. It's just the issue is because look at it like this. You look at the major events of the 90s. You had, Shadow of the Bat, Legends of the Dark Knight, Batman Detective Comics. You had these titles, and these titles would release, consecutively a part of a story, the next part of a story, the next part of a story. So in some ways, they weren't just double shipping. They were actually quadruple shipping because they were telling one story over the course of 4 books per month. The same thing is true of the Superman books in the 90s too. And that, I think, warrants things like that. But I think it's easier to do that I think it's easier to do it when you have 4 different series and when you're not having this major story, because major stories are not happening nonstop all the time, even though it always feels like it is. I think when you have those down moments, those are the opportunities to tell other stories that aren't necessarily part of the larger story that they're telling. So Joker War happens. Well, we've got some months before the next big story kicks off. Now's your chance to tell some other stories. Well, if you're stuck between the confines of one title with it being double shipping with Batman, well, you're going to have to keep telling the same story, every 2 weeks just because of how that story works. But if you have it spread over the course of like 4 different series instead of just 2, then you can take that month or 2 and tell a different story in that book. And I think that's the part that makes double shipping not work and single shipping work better.
So now we ask you the question of the week. What are some of your favorite Batman Universe memories this year?
So some of my favorite memories overall that we've seen in comics is, I think, the biggest one, like I mentioned earlier, is Dick being Nightwing again. That couldn't have happened sooner because it felt like it took forever for him to get that suit back on. That's one of them. Joker War, I think, was a great story that incorporated a lot of different facets. I also think that in some ways it's a Joker story that works for the time, and it works a lot better than some of the other Joker stories we've seen over the past 10 years, because I think that ultimately it was more down to earth. It didn't add in some fantastical elements just for the sake of it. And I felt like there was a payoff. Like clearly there's things that Tynan's going to pick up later on. Obviously we know there's a Joker ongoing series coming too, where a lot of that's going to be picked up on. But I think that story did a great job of incorporating aspects of the Bat family, and Tynion he does a really great job of figuring out ways to make the characters matter and progress the characters, even when the characters aren't progressing enough in their own series, which is sad to a degree, but is a good thing when that happens because Batman is the book that is the top book when it comes to the Bat books. It does make those other characters have to propel in directions brought on by stories like that. So those are two things. When I look back and think about some of the other fond memories of what's happened this year, one of the other things that I'm kind of happy that it happened is kind of the trimming of some of the other books. Not that I don't think that I want, obviously I want to see stories with Barbara Gordon as Batgirl or Barbara Gordon as Oracle or whatever direction she's going. But the thing is, some of the books that were going on that ended earlier this year, they didn't really feel like they had a direction. They just felt like they had a purpose, which was putting an issue out every single month. And I think the focus was no longer on putting out good stories. It was just putting out a story. And I honestly believe that as some of these characters get new series, like there's going to be a new Harley Quinn series, or some of the other books emerge from the new pack of books that are coming in March, I think that those characters are going to have a firm direction and a firm path that they're going to be traveling on. And I don't think a lot of times we've seen that. You know, when it comes to Batgirl, I think is one of the underutilized characters right now because everything that was happening in her book didn't seem to make any difference anywhere. And the aspects that they tried to make happen, like James Jr. dying, it didn't really feel like it had that gravitas. It didn't feel like it really made a difference. It was just kind of like, okay, well, he's dead. Well, we'll see him come back some other time, because it really just didn't feel like it mattered. So it's as unfortunate as it is to have less books coming out featuring characters from the Batman universe. I think that's a good thing because it means when they do come back or they do relaunch a new series, it means that the characters are going to have a much better direction. That's what I'm looking forward to. And that's one of the things that unfortunately is a good part of 2020. In some ways, 2020 has, as horrible as it been, not just, like outside of the Batman universe, as, as part of the global pandemic and everything else that's happened in 2020. There's been a lot of horrible stuff that's happened, but it gives that option to basically become better in 2021. It's kind of like a forest fire is horrible, but from the ashes, new life emerges. I think with the Batman universe, the ashes of what's been happening for almost 10 years, and it has the ability to potentially have some really great stuff coming in the near future.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Dustin, for joining us tonight. And we'll definitely have you back next year to talk about where we think it's going.
Can't wait to see. We'll see what happens.
All right.
But anyway, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it was great.
Thank you, Dustin.
All right.
See you later.
Bye.
We would love to think what you think about this episode. Send us a message at tbu@thebatmanuniverse.net, on our Discord server, our Twitter @TBU_comics, or, if you're a patron, on our Patreon page. Leave us a review on Stitcher or iTunes or YouTube, and I'll read all of your comments and reviews on air next time. We unfortunately don't have any significant comments that we noticed this year, so if we missed anything, please send us an email or something to point out where we were wrong. But we look forward to all your comments about what the Bat family meant to you this year. On to our second review.
Detective Comics number 1033, written by Peter J. Tomasi, art by Brad Walker. As Damian and Batman dives in their final descent into Hush's hideout, an old movie theater, Bruce reminisces on the ups and downs of his past adventures with his son. As they crash through the ceiling, he takes fine appreciation in knowing that Batman and Robin are together again. The dynamic duo arrives just in time to prevent Hush from cutting into Jason, who still lies unconscious on the gurney. Hush begins firing his weapons at them, happy that Bruce has brought his son for him to kill in front of him. As Batman heads towards his former childhood friend, he instructs Damian to save the rest of the Bat family, who are all still bound and unconscious. Hush gains the upper hand on Batman, applying pressure to one of Bruce's nerves. As numbness sets in, Damian intercedes, attacking Hush with a handful of scalpels. The distraction is enough to allow Batman to regain his composure. He throws a handful of batarangs, pinning Damian to a wall. Batman wants Hush all to himself. He charges Hush, knocking him from a balcony. The two friends land on the floor below. As they prepare the battle, Batman removes his cape and gauntlets, Hush his gloves. Elliot teases Batman on the loss of the Wayne fortune, something he could not have experienced for years until his mother's death. As they battle, Bruce thinks back on their lives growing up and the events that would make them lifelong enemies. Batman finally gets the upper hand, and with one right hook takes out Hush, who falls to the ground. As Batman ties up the now unconscious Hush, he is congratulated by Damian for a job well done. Batman wants to continue the conversation he began with his son, but he is unexpectedly gone. Bruce finds him preparing to leave on top of the theater. Damian still intends on solving the cases in Batman's casebook, getting from under the shadow of his father. Bruce attempts to reason with his son, but the young Wayne is impatient and wants none of it, especially after the death of Alfred. Despite Batman's words, Damian blames himself for Alfred's death. Batman offers Damian the Robin mantle, but Damian rejects it, leaving his father alone on the rooftop. At the Nakano campaign headquarters, the final votes are coming in one of the closest elections in Gotham history. Christopher Nakano has been elected mayor. He addresses a crowd of waiting supporters and reporters looking to know what's to come from the incoming administration. As the Nakanos are rushed off, the mayor-elect wonders what he is to do now that he has actually won. Bruce returns to Wayne Manor, and after showering from the night's events, finishes packing things, including the items in Alfred's room. He gathers the pets, including Bat and Bovine, and after saying one last goodbye to his adopted father, heads off to his new home in Gotham and to new memories.
All right, so how do you think of the resolution to this final arc of Tomasi's Detective Comics run?
Well, other than the Bat family being window dressing, again, get a side look at some of them, I liked it. One thing I definitely liked better about this one than Batman, again, with these parallels and similarities between the two, is that you can't just have a conversation with Damian and have everything be okay. Like, there was trauma. You can't just have one conversation and bring everything back to the way it was. It's never going to be the way it was before. And I like that Damian is willing to talk. I like that he was like, we've already talked about this, and then they talk about it for like 2 pages. But I love that he's willing to talk, that he's open, but he's also hurt, and there's just a lot of pain he has to work through. And so I like that it didn't end on a happy everything is fixed note, because that's not too realistic for a book about a superhero. But I like that. I like that a lot. Nakano was kind of there. I mean, I don't feel like he's supposed to have been a big part of the story. We were just supposed to be there in our peripheral vision so that future state makes sense. So I'm fine with him being almost a bug in the story. And then what else happened? Oh, right. The Bat Cow is going to the townhouse in the middle of Gotham. That's fabulous. We need to have more cows. I'm sure there's no regulations against having bovines in the middle of the city. It's fine. That's it. That's all I had.
I mean, in one sense, it somewhat felt like it almost felt like the story was rushed to the end, knowing this was the end of the line for Tomasi and Walker. And outside, again, seeing the Bat family, just laying there as plot devices, I will say that if every issue of this arc was written the way this one was, the arc would have been much more enjoyable. Steph is absolutely right with regards to how things ended with Damien. And again, I've said it before. I've said it on the server. I've said it in reviews. I've said it on podcasts. There is only one person that I truly trust to write Damien right now, and that's Tomasi. And in those last few pages on the rooftop between Bruce and his son, you see why I feel that way. And I would be flabbergasted if we don't get a Batman and Robin book sometime in 2021. And seeing that Batman and Robin symbol on that first page, or at least on that double page spread, gives me high hopes. Especially with Tomasi ending it by saying "never the end." So I'm still having high hopes that we get a Batman and Robin story, and that Tomasi is writing it, because that's the person to do it. I know Williamson is doing the backup Damien story coming up after we get back from Future State, but if Tomasi had written everything in this arc the way he did this last issue, it would have been a much better send-off than what it is.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever been so happy to have a storyline fall off the edge of a cliff and never be talked about or heard from again. Like Mirror Master or whatever his name was, Mirror Face falling off. It was amazing. Good. Bye. Don't come back.
Yeah, we never figured out who that fool was.
And we didn't care.
No, we really didn't. I mean, the biggest story was to whether or not if he was a pawn for Nakano, or if Nakano was a pawn for him. And so it was neither. And you're like, okay, well, it's neither.
Whatever.
Yeah, good rhythm.
I thought that this resolution was reasonable. I'm more than a bit disappointed that Hush and Mirror were so, I think, badly written. There was potential with Hush, because he was doing the same plot that he did in Heart of Hush, where he's taking pieces of Bat family members and selling them off. But they didn't reference that, so I think it was a weak echo instead of a reference. And Mirror is just embarrassing. I don't understand what his purpose even was. I did,
and I think if I could say, I think what you were saying with regards to how Hush was being depicted kind of also goes to what I was saying about the story feeling rushed.
One really does wonder when they made all the decisions about, is Tomasi staying or is Tamaki coming? Like, Tamaki wrote that story in Detective Comics 1027 back in, it came out in, was it October or September?
One of the two. I want to say October.
It might have been August, actually. But that was 6 months ago.
No, I think it was September, because 1027 was actually a single. It wasn't a bi-monthly. It was a single month issue.
Yeah, you're right. And that would be 3 months ago. It feels like they should have worked with Tomasi so he wouldn't set up a villain and then have to dispose of him and get another villain. Like, that whole plotting just doesn't make sense to me. I have been enjoying the Damien stuff. Despite not being quite as big a fan of Damien as my co-hosts, I do love him. I think he's a great character, and I think that Tomasi does a really good job here of showing his determination. I love the fact that he, defeats Hush's sister, and that was a really clever little mystery. I also really liked the fact that Bruce acknowledged his love for the rest of the family, the adopted, the allies, and acknowledging the broader Bat family, which I think is really important because I do love that Bruce has this son that he doesn't know what to do with, but I love the fact that he also has Dick, who he found as a child, and he has Jason, who he struggles with so much because he cares about him, but Jason can't fit in his world so many times. And then you have Tim, who thrusts himself upon him. And you have Steph, who thrust herself on Tim. And then you have Cass, who showed up, and she believes in Batman's mission more than anyone. You have Babs, who is the daughter of his closest ally and is just so brilliant. And you have Duke, who's a new addition, and he's really inspired by Batman, and he really makes something of himself in Outsiders. And you have Damian, who's his son by one of his strongest loves and also greatest enemies, who he moved heaven and earth to resurrect when he died. Like, the whole family is so important, and I liked how Tomasi acknowledged that. Even if I think he didn't do a great job of portraying most of the family, but I think that this resolution was well done in that respect.
I think, and you mentioned a few of those lines that Bruce threw out there in his speaking with Damian. The one that really got me was when Bruce finally told Damian, "It's not your fault that Alfred's dead." Mm-hmm. And if you can remember going back to Tomasi and Tynion's Alfred R.I.P., they ridiculed Bruce because they all saw that Damian was hurting. And I believe it was Babs who said, your son is out there hurting because he feels this is all his fault. And, Bruce is saying, well, it's not. And, Babs is like, did you tell him that? Because right now, the weight of all this is on him. And, just getting to that point and again, tying the two stories together where you see Bruce finally tell Damian, Alfred's death isn't your fault. Even though Damian still believes that it is, but at least Bruce acknowledging where he slipped up as a father in recognizing the pain his son was going through was very touching.
So where do you think Damian will go from here?
Well, in the future state, right? 10 years down the road. I don't know. He might go find Goliath. What was the giant dog's name?
Yeah, it's Goliath.
Yeah. Goliath, yeah. He might go find Goliath and have some, alone time. Go backpacking across Europe, find himself, whatever teenagers do these days. I think he'll come back more grounded. I don't think he'll be as fly off the cuff as he is now. So Jonathan has grown up. Actually grown up. And I think that Damian is going to emotionally be a different person from here on out. And I do hope he comes back to be Robin, but I think he'll be, I kind of hope he'll be just a little more mellow and more conscientious of life and death. I think right now he's a little too blasé about killing, and I think Alfred's death is really going to drive home to him what death is, and I think he won't be as prone to be like his mother as he might be now.
I think it's all going to depend on who ends up permanently writing Damian in the future. I know once we get back from Future State, he's going to be in the backup stories by Williamson. And if DC follows its current trend, perhaps they'll be announcing soon that Williamson is going to be doing a Damian story of some sort. But I don't know. His redemption is going to have to continue. And considering the turmoil that DC put him through over the years since Rebirth, especially after it canceled Super Sons, they have a lot of fixing to do with Damian's psyche and Damian's persona, and If it's Williamson is doing it, that's great. Again, my preference will always be Tomasi, but Damian has to redeem himself at some point so that he feels comfortable taking the Robin mantle again. Because right now I can't see any other person having that role, and there has to be a Robin. There has to be.
Well, it's been 5 months since Teen Titans Annual number 2. I predicted within 6 months he would be Robin again. I'm not sure I was right because we're taking this 2-month break with Future State, but I think that it is significant that they're advertising the backup stories with Damian in Batman and Detective Comics in DC Infinite with Robin. In my mind, he still is Robin, even if he's going through a period of struggle of identity. I'm not opposed to multiple Robins, as I said before. I liked the idea of We Are Robins. I like the idea of a Robins book where you have Dick, Jason, Tim, Steph, and Damian all together having adventures similar to the Five Little Robins story that Tim Seeley wrote earlier this year. So I still believe Damian's going to be Robin. I don't actually have a fear. Some people are being really paranoid and saying that Clown Hunter is going to be the new Robin. There's no way that's going to happen. And I don't really see any of the writers interested in inventing a new Robin at this point. I mean, Snyder tried with Duke, but then he decided for some weird reason to not do that. Tynan really isn't interested in creating a new Robin because he loves Tim, and he also likes Damian, and he's got enough new characters going in different directions. I don't think he feels the need to invent a new Robin. So I'm going to maintain my prediction. I'm just going to spread it out. I think by June of 2021, Damian will be Robin again, wearing the red, and we'll see if I'm right. Last question for this issue. Where does this arc rank in terms of Tomasi's run on Detective Comics?
Definitely higher. I mean, I love his Damian, and he was denied him, and it sucks so hard. And I do like. I just wish. I wish we had gotten more of this. And I'm okay with
I'll
the
definitely say
subpart.
I wish we'd gotten more of this than the stupid cult arcs.
Yeah, but even that, I'm okay with a crappy story as long as the people investigating or being Batman or being the detectives, whatever, are interesting. Okay, the cult one with well, all the cult ones were meh. But the cult one with Batman working with Two-Face, that one was actually moderately interesting because of the dynamic of the team. And so it's yes, the story sucked. But at least for most of that, I think all of us at least were invested somewhat until it flew off the rails. And I wish there had been more of that. It's I saw that he could do good teams even if it wasn't Damian. I prefer Damian, obviously. But, anyone would have been great. And I wish we had gotten more of that. And so this definitely was the highlight. But I think there was potential all along, and he didn't use it, or DC didn't give it to him.
Yeah, I'm gonna go along the line of DC wouldn't give it to him. This was probably my favorite arc of the run simply because of how the interaction with Damian was done. Ironically, I think the one that may have come in a close second, well, not a close second, probably would have been the Mr. Freeze arc, which was early in Tomasi's run. I know we said last time that, when all is said and done, that Tomasi's run wouldn't be seen as a memorable one. And that is most definitely true because there were just some things that were just out there. Whether it was the Arkham Knight one. I mean, things were just so many stories left open and unfinished. And I think that just ruined it all. I mean, I ultimately think that Tomasi may have had plans to tie up loose ends, but, time wasn't on his side. But this one was probably my favorite. And again, strictly because of the interaction with Damien, whether on his own or with his father.
I think I'm going to agree with that. My favorite would be the Mr. Freeze arc, just because I think he did a really good job of swerving and presenting new concepts. This definitely, I think, would be second favorite arc, although I think some of his one-shots were a little stronger, but they're not really arcs. This is really a bifurcated arc. The Bat Family stuff is just so terrible, and the villains are so terrible, but the Damien stuff is so really strong. And there's this palpable sense of energy and passion that I feel like we really didn't get for most of the run. It felt like Tomasi was almost writing on autopilot for a lot of it. So I don't know. I think on that inconclusive note, let's get to our ratings for Detective Comics 1033 out of 5 R symbols.
I knew you were going to do that one. Well, judging this on a relative scale of bell curving it to itself, a 4 out of 5, solely based on the rest of the arc or the run.
Yeah, I was gonna give this in my review a 4 out of 5. I think the way he ended it, especially on the Bruce and Damien side, redeemed the issue. Considering again, the Bat Family was a bunch of plot devices. You had 2 pages of Nakano, but that interaction between Bruce and Damien, plus the fact that you got to see Balan Bovine loaded up in a trailer to head to Gotham. Yeah, 4 out of 5 for me. And I mean, you can't dismiss the great art of Brad Walker. That I am definitely going to miss. However, I'm not going to complain with Dan Moore coming on board.
So I'm going to give this 3.5. I did really like Bruce's speech. Brad Walker's still not really my taste for Batman. I still love him on Aquaman more. And I do really like him on Aquaman. But this was a really well done art and writing combination in general. I think that...
Speaking of the art, there were a few things that just kind of caught me off. So there was the final battle between Bruce and Hush. And when Bruce just landed that right hook, it basically knocked all the bandages off of Hush's face. You could see Tommy. Yet as he's tying up Tommy in I'm assuming back cable, even though Damien said his own bandages, his face was wrapped again. So Bruce actually respects him enough to cover his face. That was weird.
Well, does he still look like Bruce? Maybe he just didn't want to look at
Or
his own
I
face.
thought that the last time we checked, he looked like Dick, in the prelude to the wedding.
Yeah, in the preludes, he looked like Dick. But in this issue, I mean, you saw the red hair.
Yeah,
so it was Tommy again.
Huss, unfortunately, has always been a character that doesn't make a whole lot of sense in continuity, even to his first story. So I don't worry too much about that. So that gives us an overall rating of 4 out of 5 R symbols. Tune in on our Patreon next week when we talk about Batman Annual number 5 by James Tynion and James Stokoe, the team who did the Clown Hunter story for Batman Joker War number 1 anthology. I'm extremely excited because the preview has Leslie Tompkins, and I'm one of the biggest Leslie Tompkins fans I know. I'm really looking forward to reviewing that with my co-hosts, so tune in if you're a patron, and if you're not a patron, consider. I think that's actually at the lowest level. You can hear our TBU extra stuff. We want to thank everyone who is one of our patrons and who gives one-time gifts. Please help us keep the hosting, all the episodes and the articles up. And if you also want to join as a reviewer or writer of extra content, drop us a line. We'll be happy to have any new volunteers and conversation partners. Thank you for sticking with us on our season finale and through our year. Season 12 has been one of the most tumultuous seasons of the Batman universe for me, just with everything that happened this year. But I was really happy to sort of head up season 12. That's a lot of years for Batman universe, even though I've only been doing it for 2. And I really want to thank Steph and Theo. I was so pleased when Steph stuck around, and her editing skills have been so phenomenal, and I was so happy to find someone with Theo's intelligence and experience. And when he said that he was excited to be a co-host on this show, I was so grateful. So thank you too for being my co-host for this season. And I look forward to being with you in season 13 next year.
Thank you, Ian.
It's just allergy. I'm sorry.
Thank you so much, Ian, for all the work you do and all the effort you put into these. Just so you guys know, Ian maps out the entire episode every time. All these questions, he just comes up with them, and he definitely puts his heart and soul into creating this podcast.
And he puts up with my BS a lot.
Well, I am just so grateful to have this cast. Whenever I am able to promote the podcast to new viewers, they talk about the chemistry we have with each other and the friend. We're friends. I think we're friends. We banter. We have these in-jokes that I hope people appreciate, but I certainly appreciate it, and I really look forward to our recording sessions. So, from the Batman universe to you, have a happy holiday season. Christmas, Hanukkah, whatever holiday you celebrate, and of course, New Year's. We'll see our patrons next week for Batman Annual number 5, and we'll see you all next year for Future State and DC Infinite. Thanks for listening.
Scott gave it a 5?
He did.
Okay.